Recording in progress.
Okay, we're up to Daf Lamed Amud Aleph, the Mishnah. The Mishnah says like this: Hashayfich mayim b'rishus harabim. Someone who spills water into rishus harabim. This is very similar to the Mishnah that we had before. Hashayfich mayim b'rishus harabim. V'huzak ben acher, and someone gets damaged by the water. Chayiv ben nizkai. The owner of the water has to pay for the damages. Hamatznias hakoitz. If someone hides a thorn, or as aschuchis, or a shard of glass in rishus harabim. Or if you have a field, you have a fence that's adjacent to Rishus Harabim, and you make your fence out of thorns sticking out into Rishus Harabim, or Begader Nefesh Rishus Harabim, or you have a fence that falls into Rishus Harabim, who's Gonacher, Chai Benizkan, all these cases you're obligated to pay. So Amar Rav said, and if you remember, this is a commentary that we had a couple days ago, the Rav Shita is Loi Shanu El Denitvu Kel B'mayim. That when it says in the Mishnah, someone hurt themselves in the water, it doesn't mean that they broke their shoulder on the floor, because Rav Shita is that you don't have to pay for damages that happen to the ground. So what does it mean? What does it mean damages? The damages to someone's suit. His suit got wet in the water, got ruined in the water. The ground, you're not going to pay for, but it's the water. Why? So this is what we said before, that Rav Shita is, it's not bar, because bar is not chayav for Caleb. The chiyuv is that you still own the water, you're not mafkir, and the chiyuv is that it's shar. So if a person slips and hurts himself on the floor, you don't have to pay because the floor is God, it's not yours. Here's the question: what about the fact that it's muddy? Meaning, the fact that your water mixed into the ground and made it muddy, changed the consistency. So why aren't you responsible for the ground now? I understand that you didn't make the ground, but you definitely made the consistency of this ground, so you should have to pay. So the answer is, misaver deloy tamumayu. The cases where the water, it's not so muddy. The water kind of sopped up, and therefore you're not responsible. It's muddy enough to ruin someone's suit, but not enough that it actually changed the whole texture of the ground. The ground is as hard as it was before. There's no real change in texture, therefore you don't have to pay. So this Mishnah and the previous Mishnah are both telling you the same thing, that if you have water that's spilled in Rishus Harabim, you're obligated to pay. The question is, Tarti Lamali, why do I need both? So the answer is, Chad and Moisachama. One is referring to where the water was spilled during the summer, that's for sure. And the second one is that it's spilled during the winter. Now the chiddush of the winter, and this we'll talk about, is that although you're allowed to spill water during the winter in Rishus Harabim, one of the heterim is that during the winter, the streets are dirty anyway. You could take wastewater and throw it into Rishus Harabim, so you're allowed to put it there. The chiddush of the mission is that although you're allowed to spill the water there, if it causes damage, you have to pay. The Tanya, as the Brisa says, although you're allowed to open up your sewers into the Rishus Harabim during the winter, you're allowed to do this in the winter, but even though it's with permission, even though you have permission to do so, if it causes damages, you have to pay. Okay, then the Mishnah said that if you hide a thorn or a shard of glass, you have to pay. Rabbi Yochanan, we had this also yesterday. This is only true if the thorns, let's say you have a wall, and the wall juts out to Rishus Harabim, so if the thorns stick out, you're chayiv, al mitzamsim, but if the thorns are facing down, you're not obligated to pay. Now, why not? My time apart. We had this yesterday. The reason why you don't have to pay is because for someone to hurt themselves when the thorns are facing down is they have to be rubbing up on my wall. What are they doing? They're doing that. If the thorns are sticking out, so it's butting out into Rishus Harabim, I understand. I'm causing people to be damaged, and they have the right to be there. But if it's jutting down, the only way for them to get hurt is for them to rub up on my wall. What are they doing? That's their problem. That's not my problem. Very interesting. They didn't really have garbages, so they didn't really have a way of discarding glass or thorns. So what they would do is they would put it in the wall. So put it in the wall. So you put your thorns and your glass in your friend's wall. Now here's the problem. The owner of the wall knocked it down, not realizing there are thorns there, and the thorns caused damage. Who has to pay? The one who put it in the wall, the neighbor who put it in the wall is chayiv, not the owner of the wall. The neighbor put it in the wall. Why? Because he should have realized that the wall was going to get knocked down. Why would he anticipate the wall being knocked down? So Rabbi Yochanan, this is only true with a rickety wall that he should have realized is going to be knocked down. So by him putting it there, he is basically setting up hezek. But if it's a sturdy wall, which is unlikely to be demolished, then by me putting it on the wall, I'm not doing anything wrong because I know it shouldn't be knocked down. Then Then the owner of the kaisel is actually responsible because then he should check. By me putting it in, I'm not responsible. If it's a rickety wall, then I'm although technically, what did I do wrong? I did what everyone does. I put it in the walls. The answer is you should look ahead and think where this is headed. If you know the wall is going to get knocked down, then you shouldn't be putting it there. So says the Gemara, Ravina says, Zoyse you learn from this sugya, hamachase boire. Let's say I have a pit, so I have to cover the pit. So instead of getting my own cover, I take a lid from my friend's house, I borrow his lid and I put it. So far, so good. Ubabald leaving out to tell you, but then the next day, the neighbor comes, he wants his lid back, so he takes it, revealing my pit now. My pit is now uncovered, and someone gets hurt. Who has to pay? Is it me? I could say, well, I covered it. The answer is no. Chai baldli, you're chayav. Why? You covered it. The answer is you covered it in a way. You covered it using someone else's lid. You should anticipate the fact that he's going to take his lid back. So to over here, by me putting it in the wall, I should anticipate that the wall is going to get knocked down, and therefore they're similar to each other. So the Gemara says, Pshita, isn't it pashit that if I use someone else's lid, it's pashit that it's no good. So the Gemara says, Kamashwan, the chiddush of the pit is like this. In the case where the walls, someone puts thorns and glass in my wall, and it's a rickety wall. So I'm coming to knock it down. I see the thorns in the glass. I'm like, well, he shouldn't have done that. But the problem is, I don't know who it is, so I can't even tell them. So I just knock it down, and that person is responsible if we find out who it is. In the case of the lid, I have a hole. I use my friend's lid to cover it. Not a wise decision. My friend comes, takes the lid. Maybe you could see Chazal saying, listen, I am sitting going to take the lid, but maybe tell him you're taking the lid. No, Chazal said you could just take it. That's the chiddush. That although he takes the lid, he's 100% correct to do that. And if someone falls in, we don't penalize the guy and say, why didn't you tell the owner that you're taking the lid back? No, he's allowed to take the lid. Tan Rabbanon, Chasidim Arishonim, the original Chasidim Hayomatzniin Zakutinsky v'chucheseim techsadeim. They would hide all their glass and thorns shards in their fields, because those fields no one would go through, so no one could get hurt. And they would dig it 3 tvachim under the ground so that when they were threshing, none of the blades would hit it and spread it. Rav Sheshes would throw them into fire. Rav Shadle bediglis. Rav would throw them into the Tigris. I guess they would be lost at sea, and I guess no one would get hurt. Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda says, a very famous Gemara, if you want to be a chassid, you should keep nezikin. Keep the laws of nezikin. It'll keep you a chassid. You won't be able to hurt anyone else. Rava Amar Milu Davis. Rava said, you want to be a chassid, you should learn Meseches Avos. V'amla mida brachas, and some say the laws of Meseches of Hilchas Brachas. Okay. Says the Mishnah, Hamaitzi Tivnai. We said this before, that if you take wastewater out into Rosh Hashanah during the winter, although you're allowed to do this, but if it causes damage, you're going to have to pay. Says the Gemara, Mishnah, Hamaitzi Tivnai v'kashel Rosh Hashanah l'zvalim. They would take straw and put it in the Rosh Hashanah. Part of making compost is you take straw and you take feces, and they get stepped on. So you take the straw, you decide, I want to put it in Rosh Hashanah, and let people step on it. They'll step on it, crush it up for me. I'll put it on Main Street, and let people step on it. And then, when it's done, I'll take it. Beautiful. So that's what you do. But someone slips on the straw and hurts themselves, I'm obligated to pay. And more than that, anyone could take the straw. Part of Chazal's decree was that if you put something in the public that someone can get hurt by, people can take it. So they're allowed to take the straw. Rav Shimon Gamliel says something very similar. The Gemara is going to try to analyze what's the difference. Anytime you put something in the public that can damage, you have to pay. And anyone can take it. Very similar to what we just got finished saying. Let's say you're picking up dung in Rosh Hashanah, you're turning it over, and you move it from place to place, and someone gets damaged, then you're obligated to pay because you're the one who moved it. You're not the one who put it there, but you moved it to the second location. Says the Gemara like this. The Mishnah said, if I put straw out into the public and people step on it, and then it hurts someone, I have to pay. So Leim Masison's like Rav Yehuda. Our Mishnah is not like Rav Yehuda. Why? Detani Rav Yehuda Omer. Rav Yehuda says that during the manure season, I guess when it's customary to fertilize the field, you're allowed to take piles of manure and put it on Main Street. You can keep it there for 30 days. Apparently people would step on the manure, make it really compact, and then you would use it for your field. Because that was one of the stipulations when Yeshua bought conquered Eretz Yisrael was that people will be able to put those in the public. So here's the question. Our Mishnah says that if I put straw in the public property and someone gets hurt by it, they have to pay. But doesn't Rabbi Yehuda say you're allowed to put manure out for 30 days? So what's the pshat? So the Gemara gives a very simple answer. Although Rabbi Yehuda holds you're allowed to put it in the public, but if someone gets hurt, you got to pay for it. Here's the problem. Rabbi Yehuda says that if someone catches on fire by my Ner Chanukah, I don't have to pay. Why? Because I'm allowed to do that. Doesn't that kind of sound that anytime? Right now we're saying that although you have permission to put the manure out and to put the straw out, if someone gets hurt, you have to pay. That kind of sounds like permission is not exempting you from payment. But Ner Chanukah, you have permission to light there, and you are exempt. My law mishum rishus based in. So the Gemara says, "Lo mishum rishus mitzvah." No, Chanukah is not permission from Bezdin. Chanukah is permission from God. It's different. You can't compare permission that Chazal allowed you to put straw out there to Ner Chanukah, which is a mitzvah from the Torah, mitzvah from Chazal. The Tanya, Rav Yehuda Omer, b'Ner Chanukah pater neishur rishus mitzvah. Okay, so Tashma, we have one more problem. Right now we're saying that our Mishnah follows Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda holds you're allowed to put straw and manure. You're allowed to put manure, and we assume straw is the same. You're allowed to put it out there, so why do I have to pay? So we're saying, although you're allowed to put it out there, if someone gets hurt, you have to pay. Tashima, but that's not what the Brisa says. The Brisa says, Kol elu sha'amru mutarin l'kalka b'shus harabim hizukachayim l'shalem. The Brisa says, although you have permission to put something out there, if it hurts someone, you have to pay. So far, so good. Rav Yehuda poiter. Rav Yehuda says, no, if you have permission, you don't have to pay. So here's the question. Why is it that Rav Yehuda holds it you're allowed to put manure out there, and if someone gets hurt by the manure, you don't have to pay during the fertilizing season? But our Brisa says that if someone gets hurt, they do have to pay. So two answers. Amar Rav Nachman, Masisin to Shalei b'Shas Yitzas Avalim. Rabbi Yehuda. Answer number one is, what season is it? During the fertilizing season, you don't have to pay. Our Mishnah is talking about non-fertilizing season, so nobody expects it to be there. Rav Ashi says, go on the next page. Tivnoi v'kashay tanan. Mishum de Misharki. He gives another very simple answer, and that is, Rav Yehuda never permitted straw, he permitted fertilizer. Manure, what's the difference? Straw is very slippery during the winter. You're not allowed to put straw out there because that will hurt people. You're allowed to put manure out there. That's the difference. Okay. Let me explain the next sugya. I put straw in Rishus Harabim. People are allowed to take it. Why? Because Chazal penalized me. I was putting the straw out there for it to be turned into fertilizer. Chazal penalized me that I'm not allowed to benefit from that because it could hurt people. Let me ask you a question. Did Chazal make it that anyone can take the straw entirely, or they only wanted me to prevent me from doing fertilizer? Meaning, let's say the price of straw is $1 a pound, but fertilizer is $10 a pound. So by people stepping on it, it goes up from 1 to 10. I definitely, and someone takes the straw, or they takes the fertilizer, I definitely can't get $10 back from the guy who took it, because Chazal's whole point is penalizing me. But the question is, can I get $1 back? Did Chazal make it that the straw is completely hefker, or they said, no, we don't want you to gain from putting in Rishus Harabim, but the principle you can get your money back? That's the question. Rav, bein begufan bein mishvachan. Rav says you cannot get your money back for the straw, whether it's the principle of the straw, the improvement by turning into fertilizer, you get nothing. They take it away. Zeiri Amar b'shvachan avalei begufan. Zeiri says, no, you only lose out on the additional money, but the actual principle itself you can get back. So there's a machloikes, basically. Can you get your money back from the principle of the straw? Now this is related to two things. This is related to straw that has, so let's say the straw is worth $1, but as fertilizer it's 10. So someone takes it as fertilizer. There's a machloikes whether I can get $1 back from the person who took it. That'll also seemingly be relevant. What if something doesn't have any improvement? It just stays principle, like manure. Manure is $1, it was $1, it'll stay $1. So do I get my $1 back? It seems to be the same machlokes. Here's the problem. Now what's the machlokes about? Rav savar kansu gufan mishum shvacha. Rav says we penalize the principle, that you lose the principle because we don't want you to gain any wealth from it. So we penalize the $1 because we don't want you to get the $10. Ziri Amar loy kansu gufan mishum shvacha. Ziri disagrees. Now, like I said, this is seemingly be argument related to the $1 of straw, but it will also be related to something that doesn't have any improvement, like manure. Tanan, Now, the Mishnah at the end, where it was talking about dung, it never says you could take it. Why? Seemingly because you're not allowed to take it. Why? Because it's just a principle. So you see as a raya that you can't take something that's just a principle. You could just take the improvement part. So the answer is no. Tana le reisha v'odin l'seifa. Now, the beginning of the Mishnah says you could take it. It meant for the dung as well. Ay hatani Allah asur mishum gezel. But doesn't the Brisa say about the dung that it's asur mishum gezel, which means you're not allowed to take it? So the answer is no. Ki katani asur mishum gezel akul masisin kol oisa shekadam mezacham. When it says you're not allowed to take it, it doesn't mean from the owner. Again, I put the dung out. You're allowed to take it from me. The Mishnah says, the Brisa says it's asur mishum gezel. It means if Shimon takes this dung, you can't take it from Shimon. So it's not the original owner that you can't take it from. You can't take it from the guy who took it from the original owner. Okay. So right now we're saying this machlokes of do you have to pay for the principle by the straw, which is also seemingly related to whether you could take manure that's put out, because again, manure is just principle, it doesn't get better. So the Gemara says, so right now we're saying that we're trying to get out of it that you're allowed to take the manure. The problem is the Brisa doesn't say that. The Brisa says, you take out straw into the public domain to be turned into fertilizer. And someone hurts themselves on it, you have to pay. And anyone can take the straw. And there is no problem of stealing. That's straw. But if I take manure out there, if someone gets hurt, I have to pay. But you can't take it. The Brisa is clearly making a distinction between straw and manure. What's the difference? It must be straw, you're allowed to take the improvement, but you have to pay for the principle. Manure, which is just principle, you're not allowed to pay. You're not allowed to take. This is a raya to zeiri. So Gemara says no. Amar Nachman Yitzchak galal karamis. So you're trying to compare it to dung. Davar sheyesh by shevach kansu gufam b'shem shvichai. Davar she'ein by shevach loy kansu. When everyone agrees that you're not allowed to take dung because it doesn't have any improvement. Chazal did not make it hefker. The machlokes is straw, but dung is unrelated to straw. Why? Because straw will improve. So Chazal said because it will improve, you potentially lose the principle as well. But manure, which will never improve, no one feels the Chazal allowed it. Meaning, you can't compare manure to straw and say, well, manure is just the principle, so therefore the same halacha will be with straw, because it does improve, Chazal, it's likely to say that manure you're not allowed to take because it's just principle. But straw, you don't have to pay for the principle. Why? Because it will improve. Chazal just completely said it's hefker. Okay, says the machlokes. Now the question is Rav. Rav holds that if you take the straw, you don't have to pay for the improvement, you don't have to pay for the principle. The question is, can I take it when it's still principle? Right? I put it out, it's still $1. No one stepped on it yet. After a week of stepping, it'll turn into $10 because it'll turn into fertilizer. The question is, according to Rav, am I allowed to take it now or I have to wait a week? Do I have to wait for it to become shevach for Chazal to say it's hefker? Or no, right away it's hefker. Well, think about it. We were just comparing it to manure, and manure is principle. So obviously the fact that we asked the question shows you that principle to principle, which means that you could take the straw when it's just principle. So the Gemara says, Tizbara, Karin and Golol. You're comparing the fact that we asked the question, what about the answer? The answer is that it's not comparable. So after the answer, you see they're not comparable. So maybe it's only after it improved. Okay. But you have this original machlokes between Zeiri and Rav, and that is when someone takes the straw, do they have to pay for the principle as well? Are you kainis the gufan atu shivchan or not? So lemika tanai, I think it's a machlokes tanoim. What's the machlokes tanoim? We know there's a concept called ribis, right? I lend you $100, I can't demand $120 back. Here's the question. I have a star that says I lent you $100, but I want $120 back. Can I use that star to collect the 100? The 100 I should be entitled to get. Or do we say no, the star is completely ripped up? So, it's a machlokes tanoim. Star shekasa by ribis, you have a star that has an interest payment on it. We penalize the lender. He can't collect even the $100. That's an example where one foul swoop, you lose it all. Both the gain, the $20, and the principal, the 100. So that's kind of like Rav, that just, you lose the entire straw. Divrei Meir, Chum say no, Chum say no, you could take the 100, you don't get the 120. That kind of sounds like Ziri. Lema Rav Damak Rav Meir, was Ziri Damak Rav Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, no, they're not comparable. Why? Rav says, Rav says, I don't think my situation of straw is comparable to the ribbis. Why? He says over there, you're comparing the $100, which is the principal, to the straw that you put out. The straw you put out, you were not allowed to put it out there. I mean, you were allowed to, but it potentially could hurt somebody. The $100 did nothing wrong. So says Rav, although I think that you lose the entire straw, maybe you could collect the $100. Avlacha Karen Gufa Kamazik. Ziri says the exact opposite. Another Ziri says, I think it's the opposite. I think ribbis is worse. Why? Because in that document, although the $100 was rightfully yours, but that document says $120 is interest, which means the entire document is basically an avera. So it's usher right away, as opposed to the straw. It's only a mazik when someone slips on it. Until that point, it's mutter. So ribbis could be worse than that. Ziria machanada mefila rabban akan likum Rabbi Meir hasam ela debashas ksiva davle shuma. Davle suma over there, the payment was already imposed. You have to pay ribbis. It's already aser. Avahacha mi yemer demazik. Over here, it's not the same. Okay. The Gemara says lema kahari tanai. One last attempt at a machlekes tanoim between Rav and Ziri. You take straw out to the public domain to be turned into manure. And someone slips on it, you have to pay. And anyone can take it. And it's a problem of gezel, which is kind of a contradiction. Anyone can take it, but it's also mishum gezel. We'll deal with that in a second. Rishon Gamliel basically says the exact same thing. What is the machlokes in Rishon Gamliel and the Rabbanan? Hagufa kasha. Now, before we answer that, we said, well, it's a bit of a contradiction. Amr kol koidim zacha, v'adar kamar asum mishum gezel. First, you said anyone could take it, and then you said it's asum mishum gezel. Which one is it? Elav hachi kamar. This must be the machlokes Rabbanan Rishon Gamliel. Kol koidim zacha b'shivchan v'asum mishum gezel agufan v'asum Rishon Gamliel afilu gufan nami kol koidim zacha. Maybe that's the machlokes Rishon Gamliel and the Rabbanan. Do you have to pay for the principal? The Tana Kamma says yes, and Rishon Gamliel says no. That's maybe the machlokes. What else are they arguing about? The answer is Laziri Vada Tanai. Yes, Ziri would tell you it's machlokes Tanai. Lo Rav mi lema Tanai. What would Rav say? So Amalach Rav would tell you the Kuli Alma Kansu Gufan Mishum Shvachim. You know what the machlokes is? Do we pass in this way? Do we tell people? Everyone agrees that you lose the principal. The question is, do we tell people that they could take the principal? I mean, do we tell people, hey, you could take the straw and you won't even have to pay for the principal? That's the machlokes. Is this something that is a good idea to tell the public? Ditmar, Rav Huna Merav, halacha ve'markin. Rav Huna Merav said the halacha is this, but you don't tell people. Rav Barav halacha markin. Rav Barav says no, you could tell people it's hefker. So right now, Rav Huna says we don't tell people that it's hefker. Eini, is this true? For Rav Huna afker chushli. Rav Huna, there was someone who left barley in the public domain, and Rav Huna told people it's hefker. I thought Rav Huna says you're not supposed to tell you. Rav Barav afker. Rav Barav also did. Rav Barav was the one who said that you could. Rav Huna said not like that. Rav Huna said that we don't publicly tell people that it's hefker, but Rav Huna did. The answer is Hanu Mutar and Hava. The case that he told people they were warned multiple times, because they were warned multiple times, then he felt comfortable telling people that it's hefker, but in general he would not. I will stop here, pick it up tomorrow.